of a practice, or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Happy New Year to you, and welcome to the first episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast for 2021. I'm thrilled to have you here. I hope you are happy and healthy, and your family as well, and you're looking forward to a vibrant new year. I know if you're like me and just about everyone else on the planet, you're thrilled to have 2020 in your rearview mirror. But as we reflect on the year, and particularly through the lens of the Modern Financial Advisor, not everything was bad in 2020. One of the good things that came out of the year was because we were all forced to work from home, and our clients, most of our clients, were also working from home suddenly, we had to adopt digital technologies in new and exciting ways, new and innovative ways, right? And suddenly, the lid has been lifted on geographical nexus, on the ability to talk to people across the country, and whether those people be prospects, clients, referral partners, or succession partners or M&A partners for your business, the world's opened up a little bit because of a more lively embrace of these digital technologies. And so whether that's Zoom video, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, or social media, it's really been exciting to see. Now, my guest on the show today spends his life in that space. His name is Nate Isaacson. He is the Director of Channels and Technology for Grapevine 6, which has actually recently been acquired by Seismic and is rebranded Seismic LiveSocial. You can check that out. Just go to grapevine6.com and check out that solution. Really cool stuff. Nate and I are going to dive into this in detail. As you'll hear in the show, Nate and I actually go way back to the early days of social media for financial advisors. When I was the head of social strategy for a company called Socialware, which was pioneering the compliant use of social media by financial advisors and wealth management firms, Nate was a director of social media at The Guardian Life, helping financial advisors and their agents use social media and get the most out of it. So really cool stuff to actually have him on the show. Again, he and I have known each other for quite some time now. Feels like forever. You're going to get a lot out of this conversation. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. You can also swing by the YouTubes and check out the show there. All the videos are going up on YouTube, and that channel is crushing it. Loving that experience over there. Okay. Lastly, make sure you send in your questions and suggestions for guests or topics for the show. You can reach us at podcast@truelytics.com or swing by truelytics.com. Use that contact form, or just, hit us up on the socials. We're active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and again, I mentioned the YouTubes. Okay, let's get to it with Nate Isaacson of Grapevine 6, aka Seismic LiveSocial. Nate, long-time friend, first time on the show. Great to have you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to have you. And one of the things is neat, about this business is occasionally somebody just pops up, from the olden days, if you will. You see them in your stream all the time, and also you're like, oh, no way, it's Nate. It's cool. It actually just happened not too long ago with John Prendergast of Blue Leaf. He and I have known each other for a decade or so, and I was there when he started the company, and he was asking my feedback about starting the company and some of the features for the solution. And we've kept in touch, but not super close. And same effect I'm having with you. So I'm so thrilled that you reached out. Let's start with your background, because you and I met when you were at Guardian and I was at Socialware, and the concept of social media for financial professionals and for financial firms is very new, is nascent then. Advisors were using social, but they weren't doing it compliantly. Some of the forward-thinking ones. So maybe talk a little bit about your journey there, because you were at Guardian for quite some time, right?
Yeah, and I think it really sort of, I think even take a step back even further, sort of going to how I kind of ended up there. So I'm originally from Seattle, and I moved in September of 2007.
Yeah.
So took a job at a big brokerage shop. Was there a very short time. Had an opportunity to come over to Guardian, and I started June of 2008 at Guardian. So fast forward a few months, and we all know what happened in September of 2008, right? And I'm sitting there wondering, did I make the right decision by moving? And lo and behold, right? So at the time when I was at Guardian, I had started out on the proprietary sales platform, which ultimately led to some conversations because of what you just mentioned, right? Early on, many companies, especially in financial services, they had maybe a policy around social. And it was like, here, you can use LinkedIn, but don't send messages. And these are kind of the parameters, right? But no enforcement behind it. So I was doing marketing on our proprietary sales platform, and I began asking some questions, maybe to my own detriment at the time, maybe or not. And what I ended up finding is that no one really had an answer around how to use social in the advisor space. And so we had originally started with like, how do we market the living balance sheet, which was the name of the product. And what I realized was that, well, yeah, there's probably an avenue for that. But the other side is that the advisor opportunity was just massive because we hadn't really done it yet. And so that's really where it started. And it really was mid 2010 and then into early 2011 where we really started to ramp things up. And we were one of the earliest. I remember sitting at a conference in Windsor, Connecticut, and hearing some woman from Allstate talk about what they were doing, and it was just like mind blowing. And I went back to the office like a giddy, school kid, and was just excited to like share this with my boss at the time. And at first it was trying to get budget for this was really challenging because people really didn't understand the value of social at that point. And so thankfully I worked with a lot of really smart people, both on the marketing side, and I think even more importantly, I had some really, forward-thinking compliance partners that were with me that saw, hey, yeah, while there's risk, there's a ton of upside.
Well, Nate, welcome back from the technical abyss. We had some technical difficulties right as you were getting to some good stuff there, and I'll tee us up for so you can kind of recollect your thoughts on where you were going, because you were dropping, I thought, some really interesting experiential wisdom that you learned. You were talking about how at Guardian you had a progressive compliance team that was really kind of saw the world the way it is, right? That people are going to use social. They are going to try to grow their business. They're going to try to engage with their clients and their prospects and referral partners online. And look, if they're going to do that, let's make sure they have the tools in place and the policies and in the education, right, in place to do so successfully. I think that's a really good point. I mean, like it's an organization, right? Compliance oftentimes is looked at as the office of no, but it really can be a tool for helping the business grow, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, they like you and I and everyone else that has worked at a large corporation. Everybody has a job, and their job is to keep the company out of trouble, right? And so while that's their job, I think part of what your job as a marketer is to help them understand that yes, there is risk associated with anything that you do, especially in a highly regulated space like financial services. But you can mitigate that risk and you can do things safely. You don't have to be afraid of it. I think that's where a lot of companies, when they go overly, conservative, they run into more challenges because people will naturally go to what's natural to them, right? So social is something that it wasn't like, I think early on people believed like, oh, well, no one had LinkedIn. Well, no, like now everybody has a LinkedIn profile. They walk in the door with a LinkedIn profile if they're going to start in this industry. That's probably how they got recruited. So you have to kind of embrace it and find ways to, while at the same time not increasing or taking on any additional risk, but enabling them to use a tool that is highly valuable to them, and it has so much data and information about the people they want to be working with. So it's finding that balance between risk and reward. And I think what I was fortunate enough is I had some compliance people that actually saw that the reward was higher than the risk because we could mitigate the risk through technology. And when we started way back in late 2010, 2011, and even up until God, it was like 2017 when we finally, when AI came into play. I mean, most of this stuff was just workflow based compliance. So you were relying heavily on humans.
Right.
And so there was limitations on that. But, I think the companies that have compliance folks and technology leaders that are willing to look at artificial intelligence and realize there's a lot of benefit to it, they're going to win in the long run because they're going to be able to do more with less. And they're actually going to be probably in a better risk. If you look at their risk profile, they're probably going to be in a better place because, you know, AI sounds scary at the outset, but once you realize that AI is going to do the same thing, whether it went out and had one too many drinks the night before or didn't get enough sleep, AI will literally wake up and do the same thing, and it's going to treat everything equally. And so I think that's what that, at least from my opinion, that's what I saw when we moved from to this workflow, old school way of doing it to an AI world. We actually saw a lot more opportunity, even though we took on a little more risk, but the risk was actually mitigated because of technology.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really important point to make, and I've mentioned it on this show probably a dozen times now. The old Bill Gates quote that people tend to overestimate the amount of change that happens in 2 years and underestimate how much change will happen in 10 years. And what you just pointed out is really accurate, and it kind of leans into that, right? That at the early days of advisors using social and wealth management firms letting it happen, it was very rudimentary, and it was a lot of manualness to it on the compliance side and on the content creation and distribution side for the advisors. And so it was a slog. And so not only were firms saying maybe no or cool your jets because they were afraid of the regulatory minefield that they might walk in, but frankly, I heard they didn't want to do the work. They're like, we're not staffed to handle this stuff. Like, this is going to be brutal on us. And fast forward 10 years, right? As you're mentioning, you have artificial intelligence tools that can rapidly scan on the compliance side, can look for certain phrases or flag certain things, make the job a lot easier. They can approve certain things. And then on the content side, as we're going to dive into a little bit, AI is really coming into its own, starting to help surface high quality stuff that's going to get good interaction from the audience and so forth. It's a really, really important point. So you recently joined. So let's make this transition happen. You recently joined Grapevine 6, and I was thrilled to hear it. I mean, first of all, I was honored that you pinged me early before you even officially left and had your start date. You're like, hey, want to talk to you about the podcast. Love to chat with you about my new job. Left Guardian, going to Grapevine 6. So I was thrilled for you. First of all, for the people who don't know or aren't quick with their Google fingers, what does Grapevine 6 do?
So at the simplest level, and I'll just think we are a content curation and publishing platform. I mean, that's what we do. There's more to it than that, clearly,
Sure.
but you want to break it down to the simplest form. We publish content and we curate content.
Okay, very cool. All right, and so what is it like for you? So, and I've seen this happen a lot, right? So people work for a large financial services company for years and years and years. What's it like to you to make that transition to now go to a tech company that has way fewer employees? You're
Yeah.
technically not
Um,
regulated anymore. Your life is different, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, because culturally, the workflow wise, everything's got to be a little bit different. How are you adjusting to that?
yeah. So funny enough, I was just having this conversation yesterday with one of my former colleagues who I was chatting with, and he was asking me like, "What's it like?" And because I was 12 years at a Fortune 250 company, 160-year-old company with 7, 8,000 employees spread across the U.S. and the world, and so to go from that environment to an environment of 70 or so people. Now, the good thing is that like because of sort of what I was able to do at Guardian, I got a lot of exposure to the startup world. I mean, how you and I met, right? I mean, I spent a lot of time, just seeing sort of that startup culture and seeing kind of how different it is from everything of what you wear to work, and especially now, like right when we're all working from home, and that's been interesting in itself. But it's also had some advantages just based on my relationships with the company prior to. But you know, you see the difference in the way that people think. I think there's a lot more there. It's not based on the hierarchy. While yes, there are 5 founders of the company and they each play pivotal roles, and of course they're going to make key decisions. But what I have found is like there's a lot more like they're looking to their employees for a lot more input. Where when you're in corporate America, especially, the bigger the company, the people at the top, they're not so much worried about sort of some of the day-to-day things that happen in the hallways. They're worried more about the bigger picture. And so it's really been interesting because, Wayne and Mike, who I was fortunate to meet, early on when we brought Grapevine 6 into Guardian, we were their second or third customer, and so I had this really good relationship. And so for me, I understood the culture of the company. I'd been to their offices many times. I've been around a lot of their employees, so it wasn't as big of a shift. But I think the interesting thing is just sort of being in a place where you're seeing this amazing growth and of not only the company but the product and sort of people waking up. And I think the pandemic's really helped in the sense that content is more important than ever before. And so being at a place where we are a content curation publishing company that everybody buys into it. Like they this morning when they had published a blog post, and I got the founders jumping in and all this, and it's just much different than not to say that somebody wouldn't have done that at Guardian. It's just the fact that you're getting a lot more exposure to people, and you don't really. I'd say there's a lot less of the bureaucracy and the red tape at a small company, whether that's good or bad.
And for those who are wondering, like, like not putting even in a judgment on on a Guardian or large companies like that. It's like, listen, when you're running a company like Guardian, like you said, 160-year-old company, global, 7,000 employees, you know, regulated, but part of your goal is just don't F it up, right? Just don't F it up. Like don't, because look, we're going to make money even if we go slow, right? In those companies, right? They're just going to continue to print money. It kind of, they follow the ethos of like, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM as an example, like that kind of stable, be conservative with things. You'd rather get, the shareholders banging on you a little bit because you grew a little slower than you hoped, but you definitely don't want to get banged on because like you're operating at a loss, right? That type of stuff. So they just don't, that's kind of the job. When you're at a startup or early stage company, smaller company, part of this is grow. We can move faster. And by the way, that's why large companies like Guardian go with a Grapevine 6, right? They would never be able to do that internally. Not only because it's not what they do, but culturally, they can't move that way, right? It's just out of their ethos. It's like, you know what I mean? That's really fascinating. So what was your decision process? I mean, again, I've known you for a while, but like you looked at it, you had some comfort level with people. Like, how did you decide, like, you know what, I like this company enough that I want to join?
I mean, so like going back when they came in, and I was fortunate enough to meet them very early on. I was really blown away with what they had built. The idea that if you look at a lot of legacy or your more traditional content publishing platforms, it's really some corporate marketer, and you and I have well know this from our days. You at Socialware, I as a customer, it was like some person fills up a library full of content, and let's face it, it's not really going to ever meet what you and I are looking for. Whether that's we had the challenge of, from both the supply side of not being able to produce enough content or source enough content to, somebody wanting content about a particular vertical and we just didn't have it, or we didn't source from this third party. And so it was just really challenging. And so to see this idea that all of a sudden we could personalize every single person's content stream to their unique needs and wants and demands so that they could go out and have really authentic and timely conversations with their networks and their buyers, which ultimately what the ability to do that, what that leads to is building trust and becoming a more credible person in the eyes of the buyer. So from day one, when I saw it, and this idea of going from, hate to say it, but it was like, it was hand cranked, to all of a sudden now we're like spitting out more content then you know what to do with. Seeing that, Grapevine 6 adds about 150 to 300,000 pieces of content every single day, like that's mind boggling to a person. But, these were the things of like understanding what they were trying to build. And, part of it was, when you're, going back to being at a very large company, your ecosystem, well, yes, it is big, but I have a captive audience. And I kind of took it personally, like, look, I want to hold this stuff close to my vest because I don't really want to share the goodness with the competition. But that limited my ability to really share what I was passionate about. And so to get an opportunity to go and work at Grapevine 6 and not be, bound to the pool of financial advisors or offices that I was bound to. And there's only so many reference calls you could do for a company. And so that was just one of the biggest reasons was I really thought what they were doing was changing the way content publishing should be done, not only from a Salesforce perspective, but I think even on the advocacy side. I think a lot of the legacy, your other platforms out there that most companies go with, they might be a little bit cheaper, but a lot of them are just focused on corporate content. And I think, a lot of people shy away from just sharing corporate content. So I think I saw that there's a big ocean out there and there's a lot of opportunity for what Grapevine 6 is doing. And I want to share what my experience with those in the financial services industry, but again, also take on a little bit of a challenge in my own life. Being at somewhere for 12 years, you kind of get to a point in life where you say, is it time to go do something else? And I thought about it for a while of like, do I want to continue doing what I'm doing? And what I realized is like, well, I'm good at that, but I just limit myself to a very small population at one firm versus this gives me the opportunity to go and talk to people exactly like me and help them solve their problems. Because ultimately, I kind of look at myself as I am a problem solver. That's what I solved at Guardian and finding how we could do social successfully, compliantly. And then it was like, what's the next step? It was how do you grow and go from, an adoption stage to how do you get people to engage and really drive business with it? And so for me, it just felt natural.
That's really cool. That's great. I'm so happy for you. You mentioned personalized social, right? And you talked a little bit about the evolution of the content that was being produced and shared and so forth. And, I've long told advisors that, to be successful on social, they got to be themselves, right? And too often, and by the way, that in the early days, that's some of the pushback you hear is that people don't feel comfortable with it or whatever. It's like, and I've always said, listen, be you. You'll grow an audience of people who identify with you, like whether you're whatever you're into, right? So you can be, swear like a trucker, you can be kind of crude and crass. You'll attract an audience. By the way, some of those people have money, right? So that it's okay. Be who, try to be nice to people, by the way. But,
Yeah.
whatever your vibe is, you're going to attract folks that kind of relate to that. And so if it's an interest level, whether it's a niche or whatever, share content on that niche. You will find that you'll grow that audience. I think too often, advisors do get bland and neutral. They get a little too conservative. They share kind of some boring stuff, and then they get a little frustrated because like nothing's happening, right? I'm not getting any results or whatever from this. Talk to me a little bit about how the personalized process works, because you and I talked about this offline in prep, and it was pretty fascinating to me how Grapevine 6 works to personalize content to make sure that the content that is being shared that the advisor is sharing is something that kind of is designed to resonate, seem like it's from them, but also resonate with their audience.
Yeah. So we have multiple patents on what we do to actually make this possible. So when you first come into the app, clearly we need to link to your social accounts so that we can have the right to share that content. And typically when you look at the financial services space, it's going to be LinkedIn. So what we're able to do is by analyzing your LinkedIn profile and looking at, what words you have in your summary, skills, and the content that you've shared or the content you've engaged with, we're able to derive what is known as an interest graph. And that interest graph basically is made up of keywords, we'll call it, the lack of a better term. And those keywords are then going to dictate the content that you will see flowing through your content stream inside the app. So we can do that on two different levels. We can do it on a professional level and we can do it on a personal level. And one thing that I always stress with people is like, why are we doing this personal stuff? It's like, look, I'm a huge football fan. I'm a huge college football fan, right? And to me, like that's one of the easiest ways if you want to break down a wall with somebody, like start with something you know about. Like I always ask them, I'm like, well, so what's the first question you ask somebody on a Monday when you meet them for the first time and you haven't seen them in a while? Like, hey, Mike, how was your weekend? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get probing questions of like, what are they into? Oh, you're busy with kids. Oh, I have kids. And like, you find little things that help you connect with humans. And that's what this is all about. So, it was too often what I would find, Mike, is that I'd talk to an advisor and they'd be like, oh, I'm all about doctors and dentists. And, they'd have a website. And then you go to the website and you'd find that there is not a single word on there that says doctors, dentists, medical professionals, nothing. It is just
Right.
this bland thing. And so they're trying to convey, yes, I'm this person. But if you don't talk about that stuff and you're not going to say, this is who I am, this is the things that are important. But on the flip side, I think what got lost a lot is, in sort of your more traditional content publishing platform, which is library, you pull the book off the shelf, you push it out there, you're kind of limited to whatever that book is. And so what we have been able to do is help people actually have the conversations that the client or the prospective client wants to have. Because if you're a medical professional or you're a small business owner, me sharing content on the importance of life insurance 24/7, probably not going to move the needle. But if you share a piece of content on how to grow your business during COVID, or how to retain, how to hire, how to onboard new employees during COVID, that business owner that's in your network is probably going to resonate more to that. And then over the course of time, when you pepper in that financial services related content to whatever your planning philosophy is, you're going to be like, wow, okay, I didn't realize that Mike did this. Or, oh, Nate's the guy that I should probably call because he's been providing me so much value. And I think that's where, historically it's gotten lost. It's always been about me, the advisor, and not really about you. And we've sort of, flipped things on its head and said, no, let's give you the content that's going to help you have the real conversations that the clients have. Because I can tell you, when I was at Guardian, the thing that was fascinating out of the gate, we started with heavy corporate content, right? It was all corporate content at the top. And what we noticed was over the course of time that we had very low engagement. And as we slowly rearranged the content order and made the more professional content that was relevant to you, the end user, all of a sudden we noticed that number one, our corporate content performed better, but we were driving a lot more engagement because we were sharing more relevant content with the audiences that we were trying to connect with.
Now that makes a lot of sense, and I think it just goes. I'm glad you brought it up. The concept of like the advisor who says he focuses on doctors and medical professionals, and yet you go to their website and there's nothing specific to doctors and medical professionals. But very frequently, I've made this comment to people like, listen, if you're picking a niche, it really helps because everybody speaks a different language, right? A doctor refers to his or her customers as patients, right? I call my customers clients. Advisors call their customers clients. People who own restaurants call their customers diners or patrons, right? And so just that alone, if you're going to have the specific language on your website, the language of the social media posts that you're putting out there for your target audience matters, right? To your point, like what are the things that are going to be interesting and meaningful to them and connect with them? Well, putting out a generic post or having generic content on your website doesn't help. But if I come to your website or if I see your social media posts and you're sharing things that are relevant to medical professionals and it's all integrated, that you're going to make a better connection and you're going to have a much likelier opportunity to win my business in the event that, someday I need a new advisor, or if you already are my advisor, you're staying connected with me. You're reinforcing the fact that I made a good decision, right? This is my guy. This is my gal. She's always sharing really good content that's meaningful for me. I wanted to go touch on social selling a bit because you have been a very big advocate of it. And in fact, so many times I see in my stream from you posts that are relevant to that concept of social selling. So I wonder if you wouldn't be willing to share a couple of your recommendations that you kind of like beat the drum on. We all have our core themes, right? Because you've been doing it for years, and I like to leave these podcasts right with people having a couple of action items. And so, what would you have like if you had like two or three takeaways, right, for any advisor group that are listening, and this audience is financial advisors, executives at wealth management firms, and people who are kind of orbiting that universe. What would be your top social selling recommendations?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think number one is you need to have a great LinkedIn profile, right? It's like, I always used to use the analogy. It's like, would you show up to a job interview in a Canadian tuxedo? Probably not, like you're probably not going to do that. So start with having, you know, a LinkedIn profile that has a great headshot, great tagline. That's, basically I always tell people like, how would you introduce yourself at a networking event without using your title? And lead with basically, here's how I can help you is sort of the way you want to have that lead. And then because what needs to happen is when you're sharing content, right? People go to check out your profile, you meet somebody, the first thing you're going to do is they're going to Google you. And so
Mm.
you want to make sure that LinkedIn profile really tells the reader, that person on the other end, how you can help them. And I really think this is really, really important. Do not do it in the third person. Do it in the first person. Think about how you would act at a networking event. I think that's really, really key. But this doesn't need to be, a dissertation. It needs to be short and sweet. So start there. The next thing that I always told people is, look, LinkedIn in particular is only going to be as good as your network, right? So if you're in financial services and you're connected to a bunch of other financial advisors, guess what? Your network is not worth much because you're connected to your competition. So you want to make sure that you're connected to the right people. I've gone back and forth on like, is there a magic number? Because I've worked with thousands of advisors, and I had advisors that I worked with at Guardian who, one guy was very selective and he had like 270 connections. But when I would look at his production, it was high. And he was like, look, I want a network of people that I can either refer my clients to, or they can help me grow my business, whether they're clients or they're centers of influence. Other people take different approaches, like, always be connecting is another approach that some take, right? But I always tell people, like, make sure you're connected to the people you want to be doing business with. The other thing, too, is it's a great way to figure out, like, what is your niche? Too many people walk into this business and they're like, oh, I want to work with doctors and dentists because they make a lot of money. And then you look at their network and they're not connected to a single doctor or dentist. So it's like, how can you say that that's going to be your market? So make sure that you have a really, really strong network because that's really important. And then the last thing that I always say, like, if you're looking at like some real key action items that when it comes to really leveraging LinkedIn in a non like content sharing way, is take advantage of your network. If you're going to connect with somebody, get to know them, reach out, engage them, ask them to sit down and have a virtual cup of coffee or eventually sit down and meet you for lunch. And also like mine their connections. Ask them, hey, do you know these people well enough? Like to give me a personal introduction. Is anybody on this list that I've produced that I shouldn't waste my time with, right? Like leverage the data because LinkedIn is just a treasure trove of data. And I think too many people, they think it doesn't work because they're not willing to put in the work. And if you're willing to put in the work, I can tell you personally that those that really buy into it, they can have a lot of success. And I'm not saying that LinkedIn is for everybody or social selling is for everybody. I knew advisors when I was at Guardian who for the last 20 years had been the top of the top at Guardian. And not a single one of them used LinkedIn. But I would tell you today, Mike, that if we were to hop in the DeLorean and go back to 1955 and take those people with us and say sell life insurance today in 1955, they would be successful. So, but for those that are starting out, those that are sort of in that movable middle, this is a great way to grow your business and stay top of mind, especially when you can't go out into the normal everyday world and network like you used to.
Yeah. A couple of things to build on that. And I agree with everything you just said. At the question of like scale of network or size of network that's necessary, there is no magic number. I mean, a friend of mine once said, listen, if you sell Gulfstream jets, How many people do you need to be connected with? Five people who buy Gulfstream jets. That's because you don't need to sell a lot of them, right? So if you are using LinkedIn, and depending on what your niche is, build a good network of those folks, right? People who are either your target client, your existing clients, or people who are influential in that space, right? So I always talk about it: clients, prospects, referral partners, right? Right in that sweet spot. So I really like what you were sharing there about that. And the other piece you said, you're putting the work into it. It's 100% accurate, and it's not that much work, right? Realize that everybody you want to get in touch with, like literally everybody you want to sell to, is using LinkedIn. And I don't mean every single person, but I mean take a picture of that persona. If you're doctors, dentists, you name it, they are using these tools, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, they're all on social. There's not a demographic or a profession that you can say is not active on social. And they're spending a lot of time. Next time you actually get to leave your house and you're out in the world, look at how many of those people are staring at their phones. They're not just reading email.
Well, I think something to sorry to jump in, but I think it's interesting because, you know, if you look at the stats, and LinkedIn had shared this with me earlier this year, it was like it was like a second to last business trip. I was in Boston, and we were doing a sales navigator session, and the LinkedIn rep I was with, he shared that LinkedIn every single day gets more eyeballs than the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal combined, and it's
Oh,
threefold,
yeah.
threefold the number of years. We're talking almost 20 million people compared to 7 million on those two, quote unquote, you know, most influential news outlets in the world. And
Mhm.
then if you're recruiting in this industry, or just a recruiter in general, if you look at Glassdoor, Monster, Indeed, and there was one other I can't remember, but you look at them, they only had a daily like eyeball share of about 5 million. So the lift was like four times if you're going to recruit. So it's like, where should you be spending your time, effort, and energy if you're in any kind of sales role? And I think recruiting is sales and selling a
Yeah.
job
Of
to,
course, yeah.
right? So it's like, where should you be going? And as Gary Vaynerchuk says, you're day trading attention, and all the attention from a professional standpoint in what we do, whether it's in B2B or B2C sales, is literally on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I'm really glad, and I wish we talked about this earlier. So, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast and you're here at this point, good for you for being towards the end, for getting the good stuff. This is where the good stuff happens. I'm glad you brought up recruiting because, Truelytics, who produces this show with us, is focused on advisor transition. Advisor transition is a lot of different pieces to it, right? There's succession planning. There is people who are looking to do M&A, whether they're exiting the business or they're acquiring for growth. And then there's recruiting, right? Recruiting is a big part of the what's going on right now, because we see a massive wave of transition in this business, right? Nearly 40% of financial advisors are set to exit the business in the next decade or so by several studies. And that means there's going to be a wave of younger advisors having to come in and backfill, or earlier stage advisors, let's call it that. And recruiting is such an important part of this. And it feeds into what you're doing at Grapevine 6, I think. Sharing relevant content isn't just for your clients, prospects, referral partners. It is also for, I'm trying to attract younger, growth oriented advisors to my company, right? I need to expand through advisor acquisition. Well, guess what? Share really interesting things that they like as well, and be social with those folks as well. So, really, really important point there. Last question before we go. What has surprised you most about the adoption and or use of social in our space over the years, right? It's been a while. I mean, for me, I'm astonished that advisors, don't realize how much of a treasure trove it is. You hit on it. I mean, LinkedIn is potentially the greatest business intelligence tool in the history of mankind, right? And if you go in there, the things that you can see, the audiences you can, create and access is just massive. What have been some things that have been surprising for you?
So I think there's a couple of things. I was writing a blog post for Grapevine 6. I touched on this. And one of the things I found interesting was is this idea that, it doesn't work. Well, I bought an elliptical earlier this year, and the elliptical only works if I get on the elliptical, right? So I think that's one of it. Like,
Yeah.
I have to get up in the morning and I have to go use it. If I don't, it's just a sunk cost, right? So when I was launching Sales Navigator, that's what I heard. Well, it doesn't work, and it's like, well, how'd you try? Well, I sent one in mail, and that was it, right? And so I think that's one of the things, that this idea that they believe that this is the silver bullet. And I think this is all sales. I think there's a lot of people that are always looking for that magic sauce, and they'll outsource their LinkedIn to some robot to do it for them, and it never really has the effect that they're hoping. And it's like, well, you're missing the mark. This is all about being authentic and connecting with people. I mean, look at LinkedIn's mantra. It's relationships matter. I mean, so if you're going to come into it and just think that you're going to wave a magic wand, and I'm on LinkedIn, I checked the box, I shared a couple of pieces of content, and I connected with people, and I sent 2 messages this week, it's not really going to work that way. So my wife lived in Bangkok for 2 years and taught English, and so we went there last year. Phenomenal place to go and visit. It was eye-opening. I loved the food, but it was interesting because they have a saying there, which is same but different. And I think that really encompasses LinkedIn in a nutshell. I think there's this idea, I saw this early on, I saw it towards the end of my time at Guardian, that what if, for whatever reason, advisors walk through the door of LinkedIn and they believe they have to act different, or they won't do the same things. So what I mean by same but different, it's like they have all the tools and skills to network in person. And all they have to do is take those exact same skills and walk them over to LinkedIn, and realize that if you engage on LinkedIn, engage with your prospects, if you're using Sales Navigator, start stalking these people. Like, save them as leads. LinkedIn Sales Navigator will tell you these people have commented. Start engaging with them, so warming them up. And then look for conversations. Like, the way I looked at it is, like, if I'm doing a search on Sales Navigator for the people that I'm looking for, which are folks similar to what I used to do, like, I'm going to go and find the people that are active on LinkedIn, and I'm going to start engaging. So why am I going to do that? It's no different than like walking up to a group at a networking event and sort of listening for a second, and then chiming in with your 2 cents if you have something important to say. So that now all of a sudden, Mike, when I reach out to you with a connection request or an in-mail, I'm not some cold person on the other end. And so it's like, you have all the tools and the skills to do it. I just think there's a mindset shift that hasn't happened, and those that figured it out. My concern, over the long term is that, as more and more people due to COVID and everything have like flocked to LinkedIn, it's like, hopefully sales doesn't ruin LinkedIn. The concern early on was that marketers will ruin LinkedIn. And I think it's just, we have to be careful and, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and really take advantage of the opportunity and use the tool to build relationships. Don't try to go out there and solicit and be salesy, because at the end of the day, people will see through it. No different if you go to a BNI group and say, hi, my name's Nate and I sell life insurance. Anybody want to buy it? No one's going to want to buy from you, because they just see you as a salesperson. So that's been, I think, the biggest thing. And I think the other side too, lastly, is just the people that are good at social have developed routines. They realize that it doesn't have to be hours and hours a week. It's they block out the time, they get consistent, they track their metrics, they see what works, they have a plan. If you can do those things, engage, have a plan, and then share content consistently to stay top of mind, because the amount of eyeballs you can get in front of each and every day is just astonishing. And if you were to go back even 30 years ago, 20 years ago even, to do that, the amount of money you would have had to spend to get your name out in front of that audience is just insane. So I think those are just a couple of things that have, in my eyes, I've seen that just kind of like eye-opening of like, take advantage of it, be authentic, be yourself, and social can be a tremendous tool and can help you make a lot of money.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think, same, but different is a great lesson for all of us. Remember, you know how to do all of these things and just apply it on social. really cool, man. It's been great catching up with you. I'm really appreciative that you reached out and having you on the show. What's the best way for people to follow up with you? I assume, obviously, LinkedIn. And you're
LinkedIn for
active on
sure.
Twitter is and other places as well, right?
I am, but LinkedIn's probably the best place to go. It's just linkedin.com/in/Nate Isaacson. So pretty
There you
easy.
go.
Shoot me a connection request. I'd love to connect with you and have a conversation.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you, sir.
So take it easy. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always great to have you. Huge thanks to Nate Isaacson for joining me. Fantastic catching up with him. And I really enjoy getting to share this type of conversation with you, catching up with an old friend, but also sharing some of the brain nuggets with the community. As I mentioned at the top of the show, if you have a question or suggestion for the show, whether that's a guest or a topic, please do send them in at podcast@truelytics.com or swing by truelytics.com and use that contact form. And while you're there, explore the site. There's lots of cool stuff going on over there. As we were talking about on the last episode, True Match is live and ready to rock. So you want to check that out if you're considering some M&A activity or looking for a succession partner. You're going to love that stuff. Okay. Hope you're doing well. The new year is here. Thrilled to be entering 2021 with you. We can do it. Make sure you're still wearing that mask, keeping your distance, washing your hands, and you know my favorite, being nice to people. We all need it. This is going to be the best year ever. Okay? We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.